So often people that have toxic shame are prone to anger when their needs aren't met. Self-compassion is an antidote to shame. Hi, this is Jim Breon, and welcome to this YouTube channel where we discuss all things mental health. I'm going to be talking today about toxic shame and how to heal from it. We've talked a little bit in the past about toxic shame and how it can affect a person who's dealt with complex trauma or maybe lived in a family where there was an addict or alcoholic or mentally ill parent, emotionally immature parents. You know, when we talk about toxic shame, everyone feels shame from time to time. And shame is the sense that I'm so embarrassed about something that I did or that happened to me that I feel like I just don't want to be seen. But shame is something that can also kind of break the interpersonal bridge and make a person feel like they don't belong. Now, shame is it's a social emotion in that context, and there is such a thing as healthy shame. Healthy shame is what we think of as really, it's more similar to what guilt is. And it's what children start to experience, when they're very young. They start to learn that, they can't hurt other people. They can't, take advantage of other people. And basically healthy shame or guilt helps us all learn our limits. It helps us learn that there are boundaries that we have to hold, and we can't violate those boundaries for other people. Toxic shame is something that becomes a paralyzing, negative, and global assessment of a person, the way that they look at themselves, to the point that they feel unworthy, and not that I've done something bad, but I'm bad, I'm unlovable. And when a person internalizes shame to that level and they're feeling toxic shame, it can become debilitating. It interferes with the person's ability to have healthy relationships and maintain relationships, and disrupts the development of a healthy sense of self. So how does a person develop toxic shame? Often it begins when a person is very young, in childhood. When children are sort of labeled based on their mistakes, when they trip and fall or they break something by mistake, if somebody says, "Oh my God, you're so lazy," or "you're so stupid," or "you're so clumsy," when the child is labeled with their mistakes or being told repeatedly, that you're bad, not that you did something bad, but that you're bad, really kind of starts to impede the ability for that child to even take in positivity from other people. And this is something that can live with a person for their whole life. It can block feelings of happiness and gratitude and contentment. When somebody's ideas are belittled or their feelings are belittled, and this often happens with children that grow up where there's dysfunction in the family, especially where there's abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse from parents or even siblings, or neglect. When parents either purposefully, intentionally neglect the child, or unintentionally, when there is something like benign neglect. Maybe the parents are so busy working that they don't have time to spend with their kids. But more often when there's actual abuse or manipulation going on. And the child might feel angry, at being hurt by a parent or a sibling, but then they feel shame because of their anger, because they're dependent on their parents. And they think things like, well, they wouldn't intentionally hurt me because, they're the big people that know things. So it must have something to do with me. And the child can learn to repress their feelings and discount, invalidate their feelings and their needs. People can develop toxic shame when they're repeatedly compared to their better siblings, when there's a lot of comparison or parents foster intense competition between children, and then one child is shamed and another one is praised. What happens is people can develop a very harsh inner critic, that voice inside that is always telling you how you don't measure up and how you screwed up this time and gosh, you never to get anything right. People with toxic shame can develop real problems with perfectionism. If you're conditioned to always feel like you have to do everything perfect, you can really get stuck into that kind of patterning, and also very black and white thinking, where people can become very rigid in the way that they think. Everything is binary. What happens is a person can develop a real trigger for anger and either get triggered emotionally and erupt in anger, or shut down or shift into numbing behaviors. And it can make it really hard to be fully present for yourself or for other people. It can be draining physically because it takes a lot of energy to constantly feel like you have to protect yourself or hold up a shield to keep you from feeling vulnerable to shame. And people develop defense mechanisms and ways of protecting themselves. So often people that have toxic shame are prone to anger when their needs aren't met, and sometimes can become very argumentative or overbearing. That's a way to manage their internal conflict, so they project that conflict outwardly onto other people. And in some ways, that kind of defensiveness covers for their own self-doubt and their shame. What happens is people develop a sensitivity to shame then, because if you start experiencing that a lot, it actually sets up your nervous system to anticipate it, and it happens more often. And this is really kind of the foundation of what happens when a person starts to feel unlovable or undeserving. And that is essentially what toxic shame is. It's internalizing all of those negative identity messages. Now, a single event can certainly cause shame, can trigger shame, but more often we're talking about pervasive experiences that happen in lots of aspects of their life and repeatedly. And again, it makes you more sensitive to feeling shame in the future. This is because of what neuroscience is teaching us about neurogenesis and neuroplasticity, which is also the hopeful part, because if we understand that part, we know that things that are learned can also be unlearned. So that idea of neuroplasticity is actually the key to positive change as well. And I'll talk about that. Often when children experience shame in response to expressions of disgust or contemptuous disregard, it's really, really difficult and very easy for the child to internalize the shaming messages. Things like being shamed for wetting the bed or simple mistakes. If the child is dawdling and they're told that they're lazy or that they're no good, a healthier way of maybe correcting behaviors or helping the child to learn how to do things differently is recognizing that, hey, that was a mistake, or you know what, people make mistakes and you can learn how to do better, and let's learn different ways of doing things better rather than labeling the child as a whole, talking about labeling specific behaviors. Sometimes people can develop toxic shame as an adult through experiences like somebody in the military who develops PTSD and then has a lot of shame about admitting that to somebody. It can keep them from actually getting the help that they need. Person being trapped in a cycle of addiction where it creates cycles of shame that continually keep tearing at their self-esteem, at their sense of self. And the more they struggle to stop and they realize they can't, and then they do things that they feel bad about, that shame becomes more and more toxic. When somebody makes a serious mistake that ends up hurting other people, that can induce shame. When people are shamed in public, it can transmit into forms of toxic shame. And relational abuse, when somebody is abused in a relationship by an emotionally immature partner or a narcissist, or maybe somebody with a personality disorder where they're highly emotionally dysregulated. And repeated relationship failures can internalize shame for people. So after talking about all of those really kind of frightening and disheartening aspects of toxic shame, what can a person do to recover? And the reality is that it is possible to recover from this and to develop a stronger and healthier sense of yourself. And again, that concept of neuroplasticity is key in that, because that means that the brain has a capacity to change. And when we engage in new thought patterns, we develop different kinds of awareness, and then we practice new behaviors, it can actually lead to increased optimism and stepping outside of toxic shame. The awareness piece is really important. Understanding where those shaming messages came from, how you internalize them is crucial, but awareness alone is necessary but not sufficient. In order for us to create change, we have to take that new awareness and couple it with new behaviors. What it means is tuning into your inner script, to that narrative that your mind has developed over time. And in a lot of ways, naming it so you can tame it, understanding where those things come from. And then it's a process of learning how to diffuse from all of those thoughts and beliefs and narratives, and to learn how to not react out of it. Sounds very simple. It's actually a difficult process and often takes a very long time to learn how to do that, because it also includes sort of rewiring your nervous system. You have to learn compassion for yourself and learn self-acceptance. And hopefully this is something that we can begin to learn and teach to other people, beginning with children, because self-compassion is an antidote to shame. Self-compassion is not the same as self-esteem. Self-compassion is something that many people don't understand and have never really learned or practiced, because it's not something that in our culture we generally teach. Another component of recovery from toxic shame is learning how to witness and then grieve your own pain and heal from those wounds. And this is where working with a therapist can be very, very helpful in learning how to do that, because then it also leads into processes like forgiveness of yourself. Mindfulness training can be a really important aspect of recovery, learning to train your mind to be more in the present moment on purpose without getting caught up into thoughts or captivated by emotions, and learning healthy self-assertion and self-expression. Those are some of the core components of a recovery process coming out of toxic shame. It's not an easy process, nor is it a short process. And toxic shame is something that is internalized and develops over time, and it takes time to recover from it as well. But it is possible to do so. If the videos are helpful, I encourage you to like and subscribe, sign up for notifications so you can learn when new material is coming out. And feel free to leave comments and start a conversation. And between now and the next time, take care of yourself and take care of one another. Bye-bye.